couple of the groups, if you will, about Yeshua, Jesus, talking to the woman at the well. Remember that his disciples were Yeshua's disciples were off buying food, so they came back and they saw Jesus, if you will, talking to this woman at the well. And also, we want to look at the response that the woman had to the conversation that she had with Yeshua, with Jesus. And so, we're going to take a look at a couple things here, and just continue on in this study. It says, just then his disciples arrived, and they were amazed that he was talking with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then the woman left her water jar, went into town, and told the men. Okay, and of course it was about telling the men about the conversation that she just had with what she has called him, the prophet. He is a prophet. Okay, and so uh, of course, we know him to be Messiah. And I think at that time she realized that he was the Messiah because of the way he answered her questions and so forth. So, with no further ado, let's kind of get into this lesson, if you will. So, you need to understand that Yeshua, Jesus, is our gospel of truth. We need to look at something here. Remember, the disciples have been off buying food. Here they were coming back, and as they approach, they see Yeshua talking to the woman at the well. Now, the word amazed or marveled is what they used there. Is in the Greek means to be surprised or in wonder at this, and uh, sometimes when we have been taught, it really dies when we've been taught something. It really dies hard, and we struggle with all of these things. And even though they were with Messiah, they were dealing with internal stuff. These guys have been taught from an early age that there were certain ways for rabbis to conduct themselves, and there were certain ways for those that follow rabbis to conduct themselves as well. And we have to remember that we're looking at first century Jewish people, if you will, and so we have to look at what they were looking at and how they were taught and the things that go on. So in this particular passage, there's a writing about this in Parki Vet, traditional text sayings of Jewish fathers in chapter 1, section 5. Engage not. This is what they wrote. Engage not in much gossip with women. This applies to one's own wife. How much more than to the wife of one's neighbor? Hence, the sages say, whosoever engages with much gossip with women bring evil upon himself, neglects the study of Torah, and will in the end inherit Gihon, which is hell, a place of torment. And this place is a place where apostate Israels go, and would be in the same place of Baal worshippers and Canaanites, and were Moloch as worshippers, their children, and would go and a reference to a place of cursing in Jeremiah chapter 31 Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 31 and 19, uh, chapter 2 verse 6. Okay, now he's not. I want you to understand this is the writings of the rabbis. Okay, according to uh, Bemidbar Rabbah, section 10, followed 200. Let no man talk to a woman in the streets, even with his wife, and there is no need to say with another man's wife, and there is no more on the subject. That's it. That's what they wrote. So um, that's the way that that they looked at things, and the women were to be quiet and silent and not talk and not do any of the stuff that they were, that we would do today, and so forth, and so we have to like think like the first century Jewish person would. And so you have to study sometimes to see what that would be. And that's what I've done here is gone back and say why is it so horrible that they saw him talking to a Samaritan woman, and here it is. So if we look at verse 8, Luke chapter 18, let's go there. Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18, to go there and take a look at this. Uh, let's see. Luke 18, I'm almost there. And of course, the pages kind of stick together as I get closer. So there we go. Verses 9 through 14. Okay, 9 through 14. And I want you to see what it says here. It says, he also told this parable to some who trusted it in themselves that they were righteous and looked down on everyone else. Two men went up to the temple complex to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee took his stand and was praying like this: God, I thank you that I'm not other people, greedy, unrighteous, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of everything I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest and saying, God, turn your wrath from me, a sinner. I tell you, this one went down to the house justified rather than the other, because everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. And so here it is, and this is the attitude, and this is the attitude that they took. In verse 18, it's let's see here. In verse, it goes back to this prayer from a prayer book used by the Rabbi Seder, and he gives his name. It's a long one. It's Rabbi Seder Telfilat Basil, followed 2.2 ed, and it then followed 4.1. It says, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, the King of the world, that thou hast made me an Israelite." In some books, it is as before, that thou hast made me a Gentile. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, the King of the world, that thou hast not made me a servant. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, the King of the world, that thou hast not made me a woman. This prayer was to be prayed going into and coming out of the temple or the synagogue. Do you get that? That's the attitude that some of the rabbis were teaching their people. And so when the disciples came and they saw Jesus talking to this woman, it says they were amazed. They were astounded. Because, you know what? The way that they've been brought up under the rabbis, that wasn't to be done. So if you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, Yahweh created man in his own image. In the image of Yahweh created him, male and female. This is important because when man was created in the image of Yahweh, and man had male and female in him, so this means that Yahweh was both attributes, male and female, in him. Okay, that those Those were some of his attributes. But if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 21 and 22, Yahweh took Adam's rib and created Eve. In Hebrew, the word for woman is Isha. Okay, and it is made up of two other Hebrew words, Ish and Inush. Ish means man, but Inush means mortal, but more specifically, wife. So Yahweh separated the male and the female part that man had been created to be, and made the two, which together is a picture of Yahweh. So you need to get this. When women were and are part of, they are actually cursing Yahweh and who he is. So having been taught these things all their lives, to walk up and to see Yeshua, to see him sitting there at the well talking to a Samaritan woman, would have been against all that they had been taught from a young age. And tradition, okay, the tradition of rabbis had taught them. But if they talked to a man or a rabbi, what would have been the outcome? In John chapter 7, verses 11 through 30. Okay, let's go there. John chapter 7, verses 11 through 30. And let me get there. John chapter 7, 11 through 30. The Jews were looking for him at the festival, looking for Jesus, okay, and saying, "Where is he?" And there was a lot of discussion about him among the crowds. Some were saying he's a good man. Others were saying no, on the contrary, he's deceiving the people. Still, nobody was talking publicly about him because they were afraid, or they feared the Jews. Okay, so let me look at here, 11 through 30. Okay, so when the festival was already half over, Jesus went up into the temple complex and began to teach. Then the Jews were amazed and said, "How does he know the scripture, since he hasn't been trained?" Jesus answered them, "My teaching isn't mine, but it is from one who sent me, from the one who sent me. If anyone wants to do his will, he will understand whether the teaching is from God, or if I'm speaking on my own. The one who speaks for himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Didn't Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you want to kill me? You have a demon." The crowd responded. "Who wants to kill you? I did one work, and you are all amazed." Jesus answered, "Consider this. Moses has given you circumcision, not what it comes from, not that it comes from Moses, but from the fathers, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses won't be broken, are you angry at me because I made a man entirely well on the Sabbath? Stop judging according to outward appearances, rather than judge according to righteousness in judgment." So basically, he confronts them. And he says, Why do you do this? You think that's going to be okay? He said, why do you do this? And so if we look at John chapter 4, verse 28 through 30, she left the water jar there. Now this is interesting because the water jar here is the Greek word. It's a Greek word, and it is the same word used in John 2:6, used for ceremonial washing. There were stone jars, remember? The number 6 represents man, and we could even say it represents that which is finite, meaning it has an end to it. It comes to an end. These jars were jars for purification, but once again, it represents man's attempt, to make himself uh, sanctified or clean. It's his attempt, not man's attempt, not God's. Okay, we see this attempt from the beginning. If you look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, they tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, which, by the way, the idea of fig leaves being safety and peace, and it is a symbol of Israel from the last week, is significant. Okay, Yeshua turns the water into wine, not for the purpose of saving face for the husband and the bride, but for the purpose of showing that through his blood, the only way that we can be made clean. As we discuss, the number 6 also represents 6 days, which that man is to labor, and it is the time of man labor that Yahweh provides the sacrifice to make us clean. We will be able to enter into his rest on the seventh day, which is the new beginning. I mean the completeness. Excuse me, the completeness. So this is the first sign of Messiah. Has to do with the redemption of Israel through his sacrifice as the Lamb of Yahweh. Not just him turning water into wine. Okay? Not just him turning water into wine. In this case, water was for her provision, which Yeshua had offered her living water, which would never thirst again. So she leaves that water, or the stone jar at the well, and goes to tell others of the living water and the one that she met with. Isn't that amazing? Look at John chapter 4. Let's go back to John chapter 4, verses 10 through 14. Yeshua, asks for a drink, and she tells him, how will you get water? You don't even have a bucket. And the well is deep. And she was saying, you don't have a way to provide for yourself. Now she leaves the jar, her only means, actually, to provide for herself, and she leaves it at the well, and seems more interested in the provision that Jesus, is offering. I think sometimes that we try to keep both. We go to our provision. Only he only he provides, and I think we want it, but sometimes we hold on to our own just in case it doesn't work. And we need to leave our provision that we provide and take hold of the provision that he's offering. If you look at Luke chapter 9, verse 57 through 62, Yeshua clearly says here, if one starts with him and turns back, that person's not worthy of the kingdom. in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 19 through 21. In this case, Elisha recognized a call on Elisha's life. And even though it seems Elisha turns back, what he did was to destroy any means of going back. And it says that he followed Elijah. Did you get that? Instead of going back, he destroyed any way to go back, and then followed Elijah. I believe this woman wasn't just looking to sin. I believe this woman was trying to provide a covering for herself. And these men she had been with. Okay, if you remember, the other thing about first century women and men, okay, is that the first century woman needed a man to cover her. Are you getting it? And she was having men because she was trying to provide a covering for herself. And you know what? Yeshua's whole point is that you don't need that. What you need is what I'm giving you. And if you remember in John chapter 4 verse 10, Yeshua presents himself as a gift of Yahweh, as a gift of God. Now, and he was talking, and that word, if you remember, means that it can be run, it can be mean sacrifice. I'm giving, if you knew the sacrifice that was here, you would ask me, for the living water. So Yeshua wasn't just talking about just being the Messiah, but he was offering her the sacrifice that would be her provision. Look at Genesis chapter 22, verse 14. Yahweh's provision of the sacrifice at Mount Moriah. He also is also where David purchased the threshing floor. For 600 shekels of gold. 1 Chronicles 21. And it is the place where Solomon built the temple in 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. So Samaritans rejected that according to Deuteronomy chapter 11, 26 through 29, and it says that Mount Gerizim is the right place based on this passage, and it's talking about pronouncing blessings over Israel. And Mount Ebal in Hebrew means that is a place that's representation of the curse, and it's where curses are pronounced for the sins. Mount Gerizim is the other, on the other hand, represented the blessings or of following Torah. But if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 27, 11 through 26, they were to stand on Gerizim to proclaim a blessing, and on Ebal to proclaim a curse. And if you look at Deuteronomy 27, verses 1 through 5, the words were to be put on stones made with plaster, and they were markers to remind, as reminders of the words that God, Yahweh, had given them. Sychar is where Yeshua or Jesus is meeting with this woman. Sychar is the right at the foot of Mount Gerizim, which is where the blessings were to be proclaimed to following Yahweh's instruction, God's instructions. This is very cool. Who is the living water? Who is the living Torah? Yeshua, Jesus. And by following him, we have blessings pronounced over us. And we see a picture of this as he sits with this woman at the foot of Gerizim. It is also in this place that Yeshua, Jesus, leads this woman to the truth of the matter, both in her life and as we will see with the whole town. And that's what she went to do. She left the jar. She left what she thought was her provision. And she went into the town to what? To proclaim the gospel, to tell them what Jesus said, what Yeshua said. What an amazing picture that he's painted for us in Scripture that we can look at. I thank you guys for being here today and for viewing and watching this teaching. I would ask that you please subscribe to this channel and put a like on the video as well. And I also leave us some comments. Tell us what's going on. If you have questions, please get a hold of us. You can get a hold of us through the message. You can call us. Go to our website at thebiblesearch.net, thebiblesearch.net, all lowercase, and you can send me a message or you can call me on the phone number that's provided. Love to talk to you and love to answer any of your questions. Blessings to you. You have a great